be talking with David Phelps. David wears many hats. He's a Web2 founder, an investor at cowfund, co-creator of EcoDAO and JokeDAO, and a writer on Substack.
In this conversation, David tells us why long-form writing is important to him, his elevator pitch for JokeDAO, and the power of the Guild JokeDAO Juicebox modular stack. We also learn about internet subcultures and David's background as a film writer, the differences between JokeDAO and Snapshot, and how contests can help DAOs achieve consensus while building community in the process. All right, well, welcome, David. How are you doing today, man?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We're good. Did you do anything for Labor Day? Anything over this weekend?
No, I'm in Berlin, so that means I was laboring over Labor Day.
All right.
So one thing we'd like to get started with is on Twitter, you go by the username Divine Economy.
Yeah.
Is this a religious reference, or what is the story behind your username?
You know, no one's ever asked me that, which is pretty amazing. No, it's a pun on Divine Comedy by Dante, which is, I don't know, something I go back to quite a bit for a lot of reasons. The basic idea that I had in mind for it was that economics is not at all a rational mathematical system. It is very much a religious system. And that's kind of what I'm interested in writing about a lot of the time, is that intersection of ideological cultural belief with economic systems on a quant side and how they operate, and doing it through this kind of pun. But then I realized that there's another divine economy without the underscore, who's actually just someone who really believes that God is in charge of the economy. And so all my attempts at irony and satire seem to have fallen fairly flat in the face of just what a much more sincere reading of the handle. I also like how obnoxious it is. Like calling yourself Divine Economy is just so obnoxious. And one thing that I just have learned, about Twitter is like you get ahead by being as absolutely obnoxious as possible. Like that's the only way to win that game. So yeah, the obnoxiousness of it, I think, is also highly in its favor.
Okay. And we've been digging into some of the long-form writing that you do on Substack and Mirror, and it seems like writing is a pretty integral part of your whole thing. Like you do a lot of different things, but it seems like writing is important. I guess my question is, why do you do long-form writing? Like, why do you put yourself through that arduous ordeal? And what is the role of writing in your thing?
Yeah, masochism, I would say, is number one. Social capital, number two.
Right.
So yeah, there's a personal reason and I guess a professional reason. So the personal reason would be like long-form writing is a much better way is the only, I would say, good way to think. Like if you actually really want to think, you have to write long-form. There's just no other way to think well without doing it. It's partly being forced to articulate your own ideas at length. That's part of it. But I actually think like good long-form writing is a machine for generating ideas. What good long-form writing does to you is like you start to get into these habits of thinking, what's the counterpoint? How do I balance that? What would a critic say, right? You start to generate ideas through the sheer discipline of engaging in that activity, which is very different from Twitter writing, where you can get away with absolute hyperbole that takes exactly one side only at the expense of all nuance, which is fun as a game to play, but it's not the much harder game of nuanced thinking that long-form writing forces you into. So that's the personal side. The professional side, though, is like if I tweet something that might not get seen by anybody. Like it controls the algorithm for who's going to see it, and usually they're just going to showcase things that have virality. So like a lot of times people think, oh, people have followers, get all their content read. And that's absolutely not true. Like the way that the Twitter algorithm works is that it only prioritizes content that is popular on feeds. So if your tweet, no matter how many followers you have, if your tweet is not doing well within the first 3-4 minutes, Twitter's just not going to show it. And people don't realize that because people look at the popular names on Twitter and they see that they have thousands of likes and they think, wow, this person is so popular, their stuff gets read, because Twitter's not surfacing those tweets that only have like 3 people liking them, right? So you don't realize that there's all this other content that's out there that you're not seeing because Twitter's, hidden it from you. And so in terms of being able to actually like reach your audience, I think long form is just a lot better using stuff like whatever it is, if it's Medium or it's Substack or it's Mirror.
Mm-hmm.
It really lets you ensure that everyone has that and can refer to it later and it's archived. It depends what game you want to play. If your game is quantity of followers that you're looking for and you're just trying to get as many people to like you as possible, Twitter is going to be a much better medium for that. But if your game is quality of followers, you want to be able to meet people who will be impactful to you personally and who you will be able to develop relationships with and you will be able to build with and you will be able to like have respect for you and you have respect for them. Like long form writing is just going to be so much better on both sides because it's both more meaningful in what it says, but it also is more likely to reach the people you actually really want to reach, whereas a tweet will not. Right. So I tend to see like a funnel where the whole purpose of like something like Twitter is to lead to the Substack or to the long form writing. Because that's actual meaningful shit that I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get that. And we read in an article that you wrote that you were an arts writer long before you became a founder. And Matthew and I both come from a fine art degree or fine art background.
Tell me more. What do you guys do?
We both studied photography, and it's kind of funny because we both now kind of shudder when we think about like how much time we spent in like the fine art education program, and now we're like getting involved into tech. So we're wondering, did you study art before getting involved in this, or what is your relationship to art?
Yeah, were you guys photographers, or were you like writing about photography on the criticism side, or which side was it?
Well, we both did a BFA in photography, and I did an MFA in photography. So photography as an art practice, so making photographs that would be displayed in galleries and museums. And I've taught a little bit in the university system in BFA photo programs, and Brileigh's worked as an assistant for architectural photographers, and we've both made photo-based work, and we've done some writing as well, for sure, probably more Brileigh than myself, but yeah, more on the practice side than the writing side.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. Yeah, I would say that's very, very much my kind of training. Not as an artist or a photographer. I did that stuff for fun. 35 millimeter, film and photography. But on the writing side, so like after I graduated from college, I wrote mostly on film history. I wrote for some academic publications. I wrote for some more pop cultures publications. I wrote for some catalogs. It was very much the world I was in. I think there's a bunch of stuff I've taken away from that. One is just thinking about subcultures on the internet. Like the reason that I was doing all of that was because it was a subculture on the internet, 10, 15 years ago. And the kind of thing where you have this discipline, something like film studies, that is something that 99.9% of the population can give a shit about. But the 0.1% that cares about it is their life, right? Like they live for it. That's what the internet is really good for, right? The internet's really good for those long tails of like niche activities that you can't find people locally to engage in, but you can find people globally who share that interest. And so then you can meet them, you can talk to them. And it was actually interesting because like the way that you would connect with people for a while was torrents, right? So there's still sites out there that are like invite only where you can get the entire history of film, right? Those are torrent sites where everyone's downloading from each other, sharing the files, right? Building a good ratio in the community. And then I'm still a little active on occasion in one of these. And then sharing thoughts and feedback with each other, and then meeting each other, developing relationships as well. And so it's really interesting to think about that because diving into crypto Web3 over the past 2 years, it felt exactly like what I had done like a decade ago. Because it's like, oh yeah, here we are like all trading this P2P files on the internet, which is now money. It's a torrent inspired system. And then out of that, developing all these connections and networks of relationships through other people who share this passionate interest that most of the world doesn't really care about. So like it's been really, really interesting thinking actually how similar things are now to where they were then, and yet how there's this in-between moment of 10 years where you have the rise of Facebook that totally destroyed subcultures on the internet because it was like deliberately designed to put people with antagonistic views in dialogue with each other and in short form writing. I do think so much of the promise of Web3 and what gets me excited is like this P2P communities, and much of that is coming out of actually like Web1. It's like, original ideas on the internet that now are being done in some ways again. So I don't know if that answered the the question.
Can you give us an overview of all the different stuff that you're up to? So cowfund, JokeDAO, EcoDAO, you're writing on Substack and Mirror. Like, for one thing, how do you have time for all this shit? But then second of all, maybe if you could just give us a quick overview of a few of the different things you're involved in, and then we can dive into JokeDAO.
Yeah, we also left out that I still own a company that is what pays my bills, and so that's a separate one. It's a non crypto activity, but it's fairly well operationalized. JokeDAO, I would say, is the full time pursuit. So this is what I'm really focused on right now, which is building that as a governance platform. EcoDAO is like a fun I think about it being like a pop-up DAO. The idea is like we exist when we want to and we don't exist when we don't. And so there's no obligation for us to scale, to grow, to have recurring revenue, anything like that. We just like when we want to do events, we can do them. And then we can disappear for 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, and then reappear again when we feel like it. And I think that that's like another kind of unlock of DAOs. If you think about DAOs being companies, then the obligation is like building as quickly as you can, scaling as quickly as you can, reaching volume, getting recurring attention, stuff that we're probably trying to do with like JokeDAO, right? But like one promise of a DAO is like you don't need to be profitable, you just need to be sustainable. You can just exist when you want to and have like a community that's there when they feel like it. And it's more like a high school AV club. That's what's really nice with EcoDAO is like when we feel like doing events, we do them. We've done like 3 over the past year, and hopefully we'll do like another 3 maybe this year as well. It's really just community oriented to make sure we're giving people the resources to throw events when they want to. Then cowfund, pretty regular commitment. We meet all once a week. We also have a chat and we share thoughts with each other. But like another thing that I really love about like Web3 is how many people have other interests and other pursuits that they're engaged in. If you look at JokeDAO, it's 3 people. And so there's just 3 people running this whole thing and building this whole thing. But actually all 3 of those people have side hustles, right? I have these side hustles. Sean has these side hustles. Naomi is taking classes and doing side hustles. I actually think that that's a strength for the building itself, because instead of getting totally locked into this one vision of how to do this one thing, your mind is constantly being expanded. You're giving yourself breaks. You're letting yourself think about other things that will influence your thought. And so like cowfund for me is kind of like that. By being able to speak to founders in the space, see what else is going on in Web3, it really helps me as a builder think about like what I'm trying to build long term, because I'm suddenly able to see like the much broader landscape as well. If you're a founder, like being able to speak to like spend a lot of time doing research and speaking to other founders is one of the best things you can do. Like just learning generally is one of the best things you can do to impact your own building. And then when I have time, I try to write articles, but you probably noticed those have not been too frequent recently. But trying to get back into the swing of that.
Right on, yeah. I feel like this space really encourages people to like learn different things and be okay with being bad at something just so that they can try different things. And I mean, Matthew and I never used to produce podcasts, and now we're producing like 3, and like that was never something we did before. So I feel like that's something that working in Web3 has really encouraged us to do, is to be open to learning different things and trying out a bunch of different things regardless if you've done them before or not. So that's definitely been something new to the way we approach things. With JokeDAO, do you see it as a solution to a problem, or what's your like elevator pitch to JokeDAO?
Yeah, it's always helpful to frame things in terms of solutions to problems, right? So what I would say if I had to do it that way would be like the problem with DAOs is that they're imitating traditional companies where you have a core team that is getting approval from the board to do what it wants. And if you want to do things that way, you should just have a company. You should not have a DAO, because what are you unlocking in a DAO with your entire community there? What's the point of having your entire community if you're just going to operate like a traditional company? You might as well just build a traditional company in that case, right? And so like thinking about how we can like change governance or add to governance as it's done, the point of JokeDAO is really to give communities greater voice in the process so that they can respond, they can say what their ideas are, they can say what they want the core team to build. Instead of the core team coming to the community for approval, the community itself can not only give options, but then prioritize them, show their passion for different projects, et cetera, right? So that would be like if I framed it. But frankly, I don't think it's really solving a problem. I think it's creating new opportunities. Even if you think about how I framed it, like what the problem is, it's not really a problem that core teams are doing things that way. It works. They've been effective. But the question is like, are you unlocking the full potential of Web3 and Web3 native tools for what a DAO could be? And then the answer is absolutely fucking not. Like, so far we have just imitated traditional companies. We have not unlocked this new opportunity. And so like, this is just a general thesis I have, that people always think great companies solve problems. And so investors always talk about like, what's the problem you're solving? In the first slide, or, of like every DAO is like a problem you're solving. The companies that have been huge over the past 10 years, none of them were solving problems, right? Whether it's like Facebook, there's no problem that Facebook was solving. Instagram was not solving a problem. Uber was not solving a problem. Like, I mean, you could frame it that way. You could be like, it was hard to get a taxi, but it's actually like still easier to get a taxi sometimes than it is to get an Uber, right? Like that's not really what they were doing. Airbnb was not solving a problem. It wasn't like people needed to sleep on couches and they couldn't do it until Airbnb came along. It's that all of them created new opportunities, right? They created new opportunities for car service, for homes, for being able to stay in places, and they just opened new markets completely for social media, etc. if you build a really powerful product, you're probably opening up a whole market that's never existed before. And because the way that we think as humans is always in terms of like, what's the TAM? Like, what's the total addressable market? How big is this opportunity? We always judge things by historically how big those opportunities have been, rather than realizing there's entire new markets that are going to pop up that have never existed before and are much bigger than what's ever been there before. I would like to think to some degree the same thing is true with Web3, where the really, really powerful products that we're going to see are not the ones that are solving problems, they're the ones that are creating whole new opportunities that didn't exist before. And I hope that's true for JokeDAO, but stuff like Guild as well would be like a really good example. Juicebox, right? These are all projects, Coinvise, right? That are just like enabling whole new opportunities that didn't exist before. And it becomes very hard for investors to evaluate those and say how big the opportunity is, because it's a whole market that hasn't existed and they're not solving problems. They're creating new opportunities.
I find sometimes when I'm explaining concepts like Juicebox to people, especially people that aren't involved in this space, it can be surprisingly difficult to explain something that's very simple. And often I find myself referring to comparisons, but in doing that, it actually limits the understanding of what is possible through what's being built, because there is no equivalent in some cases. Like, it's just, as you said, new opportunities. And in our JokeDAO podcast with Sean, they mentioned that JokeDAO is in many ways inspired by Juicebox. And so I was wondering, like, why is Juicebox important to you, and how has it influenced the creation and or development of JokeDAO?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Sean came out of Juicebox directly and worked with their team and like has used it. So Sean probably has just a lot to say here. Even today, right? Quadruple N Nicholas, can we call them? One of the Juicebox team members had this proposal.
Four
like,
N's. Yeah.
How do you do hackathons, right? What's a way to do hackathon? It's like, well, you could use JokeDAO where people can submit ideas for things they want to see built, and then you will know what a community wants built, right? Traditionally in hackathons, the builders are always the ones who propose the ideas, and like builders don't necessarily have the winning idea. By letting anyone in the community submit an idea, it's really helpful to builders also, because then they know what the community wants to see built, right? So you could use JokeDAO to be able to propose ideas and see what people want to see built. And then once that's there, then you can fund for it, right? And then you can fund using Juicebox to be able to have everyone support that idea and then pay out to it. That's one small example of the ways you could use it. One way to think about this, I'm going to try to do this on the spot because I haven't done this too deeply. But like, what is a DAO? What are the functions of a DAO? And I would say a DAO is a league, is how I would probably define a DAO. And then I would define like sub-DAOs as teams within that league. And this is not a accepted reading of a DAO. Like, most people even would say, like, to the extent that this analogy holds up, they would probably say DAOs are teams, that come together. I actually think that that's an issue, because if you're just a team, who are you competing against, right? If there's a good game that you're playing, you usually have to have an opponent and you have to have some possibility of winning, right? To some degree, I think we could start thinking about like DAOs as like leagues, and then the sub-DAO is the team where maybe they're competing against each other in some ways, or they're all just doing separate activities serving a broader mission, a broader goal. Those are the different components, modular components, right, of the DAO. So thinking about it that way, it's like, what are the functions of a DAO, right? Well, the first function is you have to get people together so that they can coordinate. Before they even coordinate, you have to coordinate the coordination, right? You have to figure out like, how do you get them in? And so like something like Guild is really useful for that. You can have them say that they are a JokeDAO maxi on Twitter, and then they get to join Guild, and then they're now part of a team. I think the next thing is like decision making. What do we want to do? Like, what's our goal? Why are we here? And that's where JokeDAO becomes really impactful, because now you have these teams that can compete against each other or work together, collaborate, right? They're all in the same room, message each other, and then they can say what their goals are. And what's also nice is this also goes the other way, because like once you have the governance process, you can now see who your teams are as well, because you could see like, here's the top 10 things our community wants us to do. But each one of those, the voters for that objective is a team. I'm proposing that you go in this order of like, start using Guild for team, then do decision making. But you could also go the other way. Do a general poll, like, what's our decisions? And then like, everyone who voted for option number 5, you guys are a team now, because you all believe in that one thing. And so like, go and build it. You go into Guild now. And then the final thing is like marshaling resources to achieve that goal, right? And that's what Juicebox is. Juicebox is an ability to raise capital, deploy it, pay people out, and fundraise. But again, what's really nice about this modular stack is you don't have to go in that order, right? Like, you could start with Juicebox, where everyone says, let's raise resources. Then you can decide how you want to spend them using JokeDAO. And then you have teams who can build them using Guild. Fundamentally, like, breaking it down to that kind of level, just those 3 tools of like Guild, JokeDAO, Juicebox, you can achieve these functions of building a team, deciding what to do, and then funding it and allocating resources to it. but you don't have to do it in that order. You can do it in any order you want. Yeah, that's kind of the stack I think about. There's lots of other amazing DAO tools too here, and I don't want to say that they're not really, really helpful too. Stuff like Station and Otterverse and Wonder, these are all really, really useful tools too.
Yeah, we've dug into the Jokenomics article, and we've got the sense that you've thought about governance really deeply, and particularly how governance has functioned throughout history, and not just at this point in time in a crypto context, but in a broader context of what governance has meant at different points. And I'm wondering where your interest in governance comes from and why you're drawn to governance in this particular moment, like 2022, in this context of crypto and what we can unlock.
Great. It's a great question. I tutored history for many, many years. It's a really ongoing passion personally. But I would say actually, I think there's a personal and professional side of this. So speaking broadly, in terms of where the DAO landscape is right now, where crypto is right now, acquisition is easier than ever thanks to crypto. Being able to airdrop anyone a token and get them to join your community is so simple and so permissionless in a way it's never been before. Airdrops, right, are just incredible acquisition tools. And, letting anyone join these things so simply, it's just it's really opened up the tools for creating communities. And again, I was part of these film sub communities. It's so much easier now to be able to find people, interact with them, meet people, etc. That acquisition is just incredible. But retention is worse because of these things, right? The same things that make acquisition better make retention worse. The fact that you're just getting mercenaries who are joining communities because they got an airdrop means no one is sticking around, because then another airdrop comes along, they join that community and they figure out how to, farm it, etc. And so retention is just this really bad problem. It makes sense because fundamentally the internet is a solution to its own problems. DAOs are a solution to its own problems. The internet isolates us, it breaks us off from social groups around us. And then it offers a solution to that problem by saying, no, now you can socialize on the internet, right? And so DAOs are kind of the same thing. DAOs are saying hey, we're all isolated, but let's find a way to get together. And it's really, really hard to coordinate. And so retention is just this really hard issue because everyone's isolated on their own computer and they're not really interacting with each other. And DAOs need to figure that out. And so governance for me, it's not really about surfacing the best decision. That's useful, of course, but it's about creating better decision-making processes that build relationships between people, because that's where retention is. And then there's the personal side, which is I am someone who is chronically online, right? I am enduring that existence of being very, some ways dangerously isolated from my local, touching grass, right? My local place and time. And so it's I want to be able to build better relationships. Fundamentally, the reason I'm in this space and the reason I stay here and the reason I like it is because I've been able to meet the best friends of my life here and people I care about and who, hopefully care about me as well. And that's so meaningful to be able to have. And that's the thing that I want to optimize for, because that's all that matters. So, for me, governance is not just about registering viewpoints, but it's really about giving people the tools to be able to enact those viewpoints together and change each other's viewpoints through dialogue and discussion.
On the subject of tools and decision-making, some people have suggested that Snapshot and JokeDAO are competitors, whereas you see them as complementary.
Yep.
Can you elaborate on that? What are the similarities and disparities that you see between these two?
Yeah, Chase Chapman had a really great line that I really love. And she's you think about JokeDAO, it's not a competitor of Snapshot, it's a competitor of the forums. And I really think that's true. At the end of everything, you probably want a proposal that a community can say yes or no to and agree on, right? A final version, a final draft. And that's what Snapshot is for. It's that final version, that final draft for everyone to say here it is. But what we're good for is getting to that final draft. We are the iterative process to get there. We are really competitor of the forums because fundamentally what people are using us for is brainstorming ideas, then digging down with different proposals for how to enact those ideas, right? Figuring out what their favorite one is. Then doing different versions of those proposals to figure out what details they want to change. And doing that all on chain in a way that you can actually measure what the best version is of a proposal to a community in a way that's highly iterative, right? Starting really broadly in terms of like what the general brainstorming is, ending with like much more advanced options. We are the ones that are really letting communities build consensus together through these contests to get to the point that they will have a proposal that they could put to something like Snapshot. But Snapshot is a very different system from ours. And I think Snapshot really serves a really valuable purpose for core teams to be able to make sure communities are on board with what they want to do. And I do think that's a final step of governance that's still important to have that ratification. Also, Snapshot's strategies are just amazing. All the stuff they've built for being able to like better measure who voters are and who you want to be able to vote, all of that stuff is just like incredibly useful tooling for the space as well.
All right, David, do you have a joke that you can tell us? A favorite joke, your worst joke, your best joke? Let us have it. Give us your best.
I decided that we should start using the JokeDAO Twitter for jokes. So before I go into that, I'll tell a side story that I probably should not share, which is that we were doing grants and we had no money and it was getting really dire. And we had probably our biggest meeting with a gigantic foundation that I'm not going to name. And it was two guys in suits who were like middle-aged and like very serious and asking us like a lot of questions about like utility. And like you could tell like the fact it was called JokeDAO was like maybe not in line with the kind of corporate principles that have been, instilled in the foundation to be able to, ensure the advancement of technology. And you got to like the end of the meeting and I really felt like it was not going well and that this was not good. And I was doing everything I could just to impress them and try to show why this is meaningful and why they should take it seriously. And I said, is there anything else, like just anything else I can tell you that would be helpful? And they looked at each other and then one of the guys looked at me and he said, well, actually, could you tell us a joke? And I said, what? He said, yeah, you're called JokeDAO. Tell us a joke. And I said, I don't know that I like, just have a joke on the spot. He's like, you don't have a joke on the spot? And I was like, I don't know that I just like, like a monkey could just perform. He goes, that's interesting. And then I see them, they kind of look at each other like on Zoom. One of them looks down and he like makes a note and he says, all right, I think that'll be all. And did not get that grant. So try to come prepared with jokes now. The one I put up on Twitter I really like, which is a man walks into a bar. I fucked it up already. I can't tell this joke now. It's already Never mind. All right, I'll have to come up with a different one. All right, I'll try this joke again one more time. Bartender says, "Sorry, man, we don't serve time travelers here." A time traveler walks into a bar.
Oh man.
Thank you.
It's good. Going back to that meeting that you had, I think sometimes just the casualness or the funness of a product can sometimes be a hindrance. Like it shouldn't be that way, but it kind of is. And I've thought about JokeDAO as like a cousin to Snapshot, but in a more disposable way. It's not about having the one fungible that you vote with, and that's the fungible for that group, and it's very formal, but that you can get airdrop tokens and you can use them for this one vote. And then it's this more, like you said, iterative process, but in being more casual and maybe a little less serious, it could maybe run into that issue of not being taken as seriously as a Snapshot. So I'm glad that you don't see these things as exclusive and you see them working together. And we also noticed that you have been working on a proposal for MakerDAO, right?
Yeah. So we just put that up with a couple Maker delegates yesterday, and feedback's been positive so far. Maker's a really interesting project also because it is technically, quite decentralized. There isn't necessarily a person who makes decisions there, right? So it's kind of fun to think, how do you get a proposal passed to do a new type of proposal systems? It's like meta governance and trying to figure out like who approves this, who doesn't, etc. But they've been super supportive. Just like working with the delegates there has been absolute joy. And yeah, hopefully we'll be able to start off with some like really low stakes contests and then see how the community responds to that and then go from there.
Nice. Do you have any other JokeDAO alpha for us? Anything else that's on the radar that we should know about?
Your favorite? I don't know. I'm gonna knock on wood because we have some really exciting projects we're talking to right now, and I don't want to risk it. If any of them come through, it'll be pretty huge for us. Hopefully that'll happen within the next month, so we'll have news soon.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with us today, David. It's been really fun.
My pleasure. Yeah, I'll try to come up with better jokes for next time.
It's funny because I mentioned this in the JokeDAO episode with Sean, but My mom will send me emails like all the time. They all have the subject line howdy, and inside is like a joke. It's just a joke email. And like one of them was like, "Dear Brileigh, go look in the mirror. Ha ha." And I was like, okay.
This is an amazing joke. I love this joke.
Yeah, I was like, okay, like thanks, Mom.
Tell your mom to start submitting to the joke contest. She seems to be much better at this than many of the people who submit.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, David.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.